This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I think this was on mute. I was talking all the way. I'm so sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm so sorry. So, all right. So, yesterday we did take a look at the hospital workflow and the basic aspects of hospital workflow. We did see what is a messaging structure, how message looks like, and we also did see how the name HL7 has come, why it has been given as HL7. And we also understood that HL7 message is nothing but it comprises of segments, and segments are a combination of fields, and fields do contain components. And we also saw that HL7 messaging methodology is completely based on events that are happening in the real-time world. Um, Maja, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So today we will be looking further into how the messaging methodology works. So we'll see how an event which is happening in the real-time world will generate the necessity of data flow from one system to another system. That is called as a trigger event. That is a standard definition, which means that an event that is happening in the real-time world, for example, the registration that is happening at the front desk is a real-time event that is happening. So when the registration is completed, eventually the data has to flow from PM system to the HR system, right? Because the data has to go over to the doctor's desk so the doctor can know who is the patient, what are his details and all. And also, uh, if you consider another event, appointment scheduling, uh, patient's appointment is scheduled, and eventually the data has to flow from PM system to the HR system, right? So that event that is happening in the real-time world is actually generating the necessity where the data has to flow from one system to another system. So this is called as a trigger event. Entire messaging structure of HL7 is based on these trigger event that is happening in the real-time world. So for example, if you talk about HL7, if you talk about registration, if you talk about appointments and order placing and all, these are individual events that are happening. So today we'll be taking a deeper look at how these individual events are named in terms of HL7, actually what are the events that are possible, and how these are termed in terms of HL7 and all. So we'll take a look at the structure. So as I said, trigger event is nothing but a real-time event that is happening, because of which a data can move from one system to another. So patient is admitted into the hospital and the registration is done. So that registration data has to flow from PM to EHR. This is one example. And another example is an observation being sent from EHR system to the lab, which is to perform some tests like complete blood count or thyroid test or TSH test and so on. So it can be anything. So it is based on event that is happening. So that is called as a trigger event. So what are the possible broad events on a broader note, which is happening in the hospital workflow are patient registration, appointment scheduling, labs, which is nothing but placing orders or receiving results from the labs. And then next we have charges, which are nothing but which will communicate about the charge related information back from EHR to the PM system and also from lab to the PM system. And we also have two other events, as I said yesterday, pharmacies and insurances. But these are not transacted in the form of HL7, so we won't be looking at them. We'll be concentrating mainly on the other four events: registration, appointments, labs, and charges. So when we look at the registration, each of these have their own names, dedicated names in terms of HL7 or from HL7 perspective. So let us talk about them one by one. Number one is registration. So registration is usually indicated with ADT. ADT is nothing but admit, discharge, and transfer. So often we see that the acronyms itself will let us know what that particular data, what is the nature of the data that we are dealing with, and what information the data might have. So mostly you will see that if you talk about, for example, if we did talk about patient identification segment yesterday. So as the name itself suggests, patient identification, it is about identifying, it has the information of identifying a patient. Similarly, here we are seeing about registration. Registration is nothing but it indicates ADT. It is indicated in the form of ADT, which is admit, discharge, and transfer. So any event that is happening in the hospital with respect to admission of a patient or discharge of a patient or uh, transfer of a patient, then that is usually indicated or represented as ADT. Registration is a common term in English, but in HL7 language, it is called as ADT. And next we have appointment schedule. Appointment schedule is indicated or represented with SIU, which is scheduling information unsolicited. So unsolicited means unidirectional, which means these kind of messages or events will have only one directional flow. For example, appointments are scheduled in the PM system and then they will be sent over to the EHR system so the doctor can be notified. And this scenario cannot happen in the other way around, which means patient going to the doctor and then getting the appointment scheduled, doctor scheduling the appointment in EHR system and that data flowing over back to the PM system. That is not a real-time scenario that can happen, which is why Appointments are always unidirectional and they flow from PM to EHR. Usually this is called as scheduling information unsolicited. The term unsolicited specifically indicates that it is unidirectional. These kind of messages are unidirectional. Next, we have labs. So in labs, we have two main events. One is orders and the other one is results. So when we talk about orders, we see that we have ORM, and from results perspective, we have ORU. We'll check both of them. ORM is observation request message. So as the name itself suggests, it's an observation request or an order that is being sent from EHR to lab system. Once the order is received, patient will visit the lab, and once he visits the lab, next he will go ahead and get his test done. And after completing the test, the results will be sent back from EHR lab system to the EHR system. And these messages will be indicated or represented with ORU, which is nothing but observation results unsolicited. Again, we are seeing the term unsolicited here, which means they are unidirectional. Results don't flow from EHR to the PM system, EHR to the lab system. They are always from lab to the EHR system, which is why it is called as unsolicited. Next up, we have charges. So charges are indicated with one message type, that is nothing but PO3. Sorry, that is event type. So they are represented as DFT, which is detailed financial transaction. As the name itself suggests, it will give you clear information in detailed manner about the finances that or the charges that has happened for patient's encounter, as well as if he got done some of his medicals, some of his medical labs, then all of those charges will be sent back to the PM system so that a claim can be raised or can be collected from the patient. In this way, we are seeing that each and every event, major 5 events which were part of the hospital workflow, have their own individual names when we see them from HL7 perspective. Let us jump to the next slide and we'll see how these events these events that we have seen are from a broader perspective. Let us see how those events can be individually narrowed down to specific events in the hospital workflow. So when we talk about registration is what we have seen on a broader note, which will include registration of a new patient or update of existing details or deleting a patient's account or updating guarantor information or insurance information and so on. So all of these fall part of an ADT message, which is registration message, right? So if we break down the actual events that are happening, there will be many, but we'll be taking a look at few of them which we repeatedly see, which are the most important event types, and we will go through each one of them. So registration has two main events possibly. One is new patient registration and update of existing details. There are others, there are other event types, but these are the things that we frequently work on when we are dealing with HL7 implementations. And then we have appointments, charges, and labs, as we know. So next we have appointment schedule. So there are 3 events that are possible as part of appointment schedule. Number 1 would be creation of a new appointment. Number 2 would be update of an existing appointment. Number 3 would be deleting of an existing appointment. So all these 3 events are part of appointment scheduling. Next we have charges. For charges, we have only one event. Basically, that event itself will contain everything related to charge, whether it is pay doctor related encounter charge or any procedure charge or the lab charge. All of them are communicated or all of them are embedded within charge information itself of charges message type. Next up, we have labs. Labs are nothing but, as we know, orders and results. So there are two events that are possible, which are orders and results. Now, these are the terms which we are seeing in general English. So we are just taking a look at to understand what are the possible events that we might have in each of these individual message types. But in terms of HL7, we have specific names to them. New patient registration has its own name. Update of appointment has its own name. They are usually indicated with codes. So those codes are called as event types. We'll take a look at those event types for all of these events that we are seeing. So we have an ADT message. So in an ADT message, we'll see that we had two events. One is new patient registration, other one is update of existing patient details. What is ADT? ADT is admit, discharge, and transfer. And then these as A04 or A28 as event types for new patient registration. So anytime at any point of time in an HL7 message, if you're seeing A04 or A28, it means we have to understand that it's a HL7 message which is actually having new patient related information. Okay. And then we have next one we have is update of existing patient details, which is represented as A08 or A31. Okay. And then we have appointments. So from ADT perspective, you will also see there are many other events, A01, A05, A08, A08 we have already seen, A18, A19, and so on. Each of them have their own significance, but these are the basics that we need to understand, which usually deal with an ADT message most of the times. Next we have SIU. SIU is scheduling information unsolicited, as I said before. So it has three events: new appointment scheduling, second one is update of existing appointment, third one is cancellation. So when a new appointment is scheduled, it is represented as SIU S12 and SIU S14 for modification of appointment, which means adding comments to the existing appointments or changing the time of an appointment, and so on. Then we have SIUS 15, which is to cancel an existing appointment. If an appointment is already created and if you want to cancel, then we have SIUS 15 for that. Next, we have Dft Po3. So this is very simply, sorry, this is related to charges. So there is only one event type, Dft Po3. There is no other event to get confused with. So wherever you see Dft Po3, it means that it is a charge related message. Next we have ORM and ORU. ORM has the event type of O01, which is to represent an order message or a lab test that is being placed in the HR system and will flow over to lab system. Then once the lab is done with the test, it will go ahead and return the results back to the hospital system, which is called as ORU, which again indicates observation result unsolicited, and the event type is R01. Okay, so in this way we have different message types, and also how these individual message types are broadly categorized into different events, so that it will be easy for us to understand each and every event that is happening in the real-time world and translate them in terms of HL7 in order to communicate with some other systems down the line. So any questions with these guys?
Yeah, so what are these A04? Is that a field in ADT segment, or how does it look like? And
It,
and
it is
do we have like all the all the numbers in between, like from A04 through A28?
Yeah, we do have
Okay.
those events. So these are nothing but a representation of a certain event that is happening. As I said, for example, if you have a new patient registration, we say that if we are generally communicating, if I have to tell you that, uh, tell you or describe the event that is happening at the front desk when patient walks in, we say that he is getting registered, right? That is how we usually communicate. I'll tell you that a patient has walked in and he is giving his details so that his details can be registered into a system. But when HL7 has to communicate that, then it will communicate with the help of a code called as A04 or A28. So whenever we are seeing A04 or A28, it is an event type. What type of event is happening is indicated with the help of A04 or A28 or any of the events for that fact.
So what
So
would be the
in
difference between A04 and A28 since both are for new patients?
So, yeah, honestly speaking, there is no much difference in the messaging structure. There are only few additional advantages with A28 where you can add some additional information like NK1, which is next of kin and all. But most of the times we'll be seeing that may or may not be present. It's about the preference of the system, whoever is implementing it. Few people use ADT A04. From my experience, I've seen that few people using A04 and few people will be using A28 for to represent a new patient registration message.
Thank you.
So
Welcome.
similarly, so for A08 or A31 is basically they contain additional segments. Is that it? Like, I mean, that's the difference between the different events.
Yeah, here the event is, for example, if you talk about A08, A31, the event is updating of existing patient details, which means whether his email address changed or he had new insurances added up and so on. And the difference between A08 and A31, yes, there might be few additional fields or segments which are part of which actually differentiates A08 and A31. But if you talk about differences of A04 and A08, no, there is the message structure the messaging structure remains same in A04 and A08, or when we talk about A28 or A31. If you compare A28 and A31, the structure looks exactly same. It's just the event is different. But when we talk about A04 and A28, event is same, but the messaging structure might differ a little,
So
which means having about the segments or additional segments in A28 when compared to A04.
so are there so like, I mean, what about, say, is there a A05? And I mean, is that also just like, it might just have additional field similar to A4, A04?
Yes, A05 is patient admission. When there is an inpatient, then they usually use A05 to indicate or send out some information to the EHR system. That is a different event altogether.
Oh.
Yeah. So more frequently, these are the events that we will be usually coming up with. You will have A01 as well and A05 as you said. We will also be having A18, which usually represents a merge message. Okay, and we'll also have yeah, A18, which is used to represent merge message, or A34, which again does the same work of representing a merge related message. But how frequently they are seen? Out of 10 implementations that you have, two will be of that kind. One or two will be of that kind. But rest of the 8 implementations that you will see will fall mostly under these buckets that we are seeing. Either it will be a new patient or update existing patient registrations or appointments or charges or orders and results. So there are other message types and event types as well when we dig even more deeper. For example, uh, I'll tell you a scenario. Now, when the hospital is done with collecting all the entire information about the patient and patient is seen and during the process of encounter, they will also discuss about what are the immunizations that the patient had in the past. And in case if something is missing, doctor will go ahead and suggest those immunizations. Every hospital is supposed to go ahead and share their immunization information with the state registry in the USA. So that state can have information about each and every citizen who is present in that state and also have the information whether this particular citizen has taken all the immunizations or not. So that is used on a very high level for analysis purpose to most probably to predict and see if the state is healthy and has received all the types of immunizations or not. So the whole catch here is immunization information has to be shared with the state registry. Each and every hospital in that particular state should do that. So when this type of information has to be sent over from the HR system to the state registry, they are indicated with different type of message type. Okay, and they are called as VX message types. Usually they are being the VX message types, and V01 is the event type that we usually see when we want to communicate about immunization information. So that is a different thing again.
So are we
So
going to get a list or documentation on all those types, either throughout the course or at the end of it?
uh, throughout the course, we'll be concentrating on these events and 2 or 3 other message types that we most frequently see, like MDM messages. What is MDM message type? What is QRY message type, which is query response message type? But VXU and immunizations, no, we are not going to take a look at that. There are many of that kind where I'll be sharing a few documents and details and few websites where you can get this information from of what are the various events that are possible uh, from HL7 perspective. Okay, in the
Okay.
introduction session, we have seen that we have around 86 message types and event types, but not all of them are used frequently.
So, in an interface, like, do we have to account for each individual message type, or so do it like for both A04 or A28, or can you build a channel? It's like, hey, I'm just looking for A28, but if they send a A04, if they're very similar, just with a few less details, it will still accept it, or no, it has to match that, hey, only A04s or only A28s.
That's a good question. So it depends on how the interface architect going to design the implementation. So if you will say that we want to have individual channels for each and every event type, for example, new registration should pass on from one channel, update of existing patient information should pass through second channel. And few will say
Usually,
that we will,
whoever requests an interface, they send you specs,
yes.
right?
So yes, so it also that is depending on the person whom we are implementing an interface with on the other side. But when we want to send out the information, for example, now the other person says that they want to receive ADT messages. From our side, when we are sending out the ADT messages from our PM system, we can architect it in many ways. We can have a single channel communicating all the different types of messages that we have. For example, we might want to send an ADT message, we might want to send an SIO message. We can design it that way. within one single channel. And at the same time, we can also design the channel to have one channel each for one message type, which means for ADTs we can have one message type for one channel, and for SIUs we can have another channel. And within ADTs we can have both A04s and A28s, A31s being accepted. However, based on the event that is happening in the real world, we can go ahead and write some transformations to change the message type and then send over the message to the destination. So it's up to us because we have so much flexibility of how we can go ahead and do it. Architecting it properly is definitely essential. Designing it properly in the initial phases of how we want to send it. We can definitely go ahead and inhibit or stop sending other message types if we want to from one single channel. We can set up filters and say that if it is a new patient registration, then don't send ADT A28 or um, ADT A31. So it completely depends on us on how we want to go ahead and design the interface.
And are you supposed to know about each and every message type and event for certification, or
From certification perspective, yes, most of them, which are part of our chapters 2, 2A, 2B, we need to understand them. And it's mostly about, uh, as I said yesterday, most of the questions will be from data types. So in data types, you need to memorize a lot, honestly speaking. There is a lot to memorize. So HL7 is mostly a memory-based messaging protocol.
So, in regards to for the SIU portion, so I'm guessing
Mhm.
it's similar. Like, I mean, you have, is there like a S? I mean, I think I saw a S13 at one point. Um, so like, is there, are they vastly different, or is it similar? Like, it's just, additional fields.
Yeah, the mostly the difference would be one or other additional field being added or any additional segment being added when we talk about the events which are part of same message type. Okay, but as I said, it's not that frequent. I have never seen S13, honestly speaking. So most of the times we'll be seeing 12, 14, and 15 itself. And just to step ahead further, you at times we will also see that appointments are communicated with the help of ADT message type as well. But that is a little confusing, not required at this point of time. That is little bit advanced version of how we can implement an HL7 implementation with other message types. Uh, for example, appointments can also be implemented using ADT message type, but there are certain uh, steps that we need to take care of while doing so. And again, we will share those specification with the other person if other person is ready to accept ADT message type for receiving or sending out appointments. So that depends again. It's a odd scenario out from the regular practice that we have. The regular practice is to use SIUS 12, 14, and 15. Okay, any other questions?
No, we can move on, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So once we understand these things, I think as in when you encounter with other message types in your real-time life experience, then you can easily understand them and relate them. But understanding these are the basic events and the message types that cover the entire workflow of the hospital. Other events which might come up, like I said, VXU, which is for immunizations. Uh, those fall, those are some additional events that are happening in the hospitals, which usually generates the necessity of data flow from the hospital systems to the other systems. So it depends. So those additional events can be learned later once you cover all of these basic stuff. So next we will see so now we will be going deep into each and every message type to see what are the different types of segments that are present in an HL7 message. And when we talk about those segments, we'll be individually talking about the fields of those segments as well to understand. So at the end of this slide, we are going to take a look at what are the different segments that are present in an HL7 message for an ADT A04 message type. And I represented it as ADT A04. In fact, A28, A31, and A08 will also have the same structure, more or less the same structure. And we'll be taking a look at each and every segments and fields present in that particular message. Now, as discussed earlier, ADT A04 or 28, everything falls under one bucket of registration. ADT indicates admit, discharge, and transfer. And these have demographic related information. Whatever the registration details that are captured by the front-end receptionist, all of those details are present in these messages, A04 or A08, 28 or 31. So what are the most frequent segments that we will be seeing in an ADT A04 or A08 message type? They are MSH, EVN, PID, PV1, GT1, and IN1. And I have also told you that most of the times acronyms will indicate or will represent what kind of data that they are dealing with. MSH is going to have some information related to header, which means it is like our textbook that we have in our school. We have the index in a textbook, right? And it will describe what is the content of the entire textbook. In the same way, MSH is like index, where it will tell where the message is coming from, where it is going to, when that particular message got generated, and it will also indicate what kind of message that we are dealing with, and so on. We'll be taking a look at each and every field in a while. And then we have EVN. EVN is event segment, which indicates what event that we are dealing with. And then PID, which is patient identification segment. This will have the entire patient related information, like name, date of birth, his gender, his email address, whether he is married or unmarried, and whether he has, and what are the other details like phone number, mailing address, and so on. So all of those details are present in PID. PV1 is patient visit segment. It indicates or represents what are the various visit details, like who he has been referred by, and in case if there is any visit number, then that will be shown up in PV1 segment. And it will also indicate what kind of patient, whether it is an inpatient or an outpatient, and so on, will be indicated in PV1 segment. Next we have GT1. GT1 is guarantor segment, which will have guarantor related information. And then we have IN1 segment, which indicates insurance segment. So we will look at MSH segment. Now, so for each and every segment, we'll have these kind of tables. Let me give you a little overview about this table. So first column represents the sequence, which means it represents the field number. When I say MSH1, MSH2, 3, 4, it means that we are talking about individual fields. And this is MSH1, this is MSH2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and so on. So we are talking about the field number here when we are saying sequence. And then we have length, which means if it has 0, it means that it can start from 0 with unlimited numbers. But in case if there is a number, then there is a limitation. MSH2 can take up only 5 characters, not more than 5 characters. MSH1 can have only 1 character. MSH10 can have 199 characters, nothing more than that. So on. So basically, length represents the number or the character limit. Next, we have DT, which is data type. So it indicates what type of data can pass through these particular fields, each of these individual fields. And then we have optionality. So in optionality, we have few things that we need to understand. In optionality, we have R. R means required. Next, we have O, which is optional. Required in the sense there should be data in that particular field for sure. So if you see R anywhere in the Hl7 field, then data has to be present. Optional in the sense it's up to us or up to the system whether the data is being sent in these fields or not when we are sending out the data. Then we have C, conditionally required, which means based on certain other conditions, we will see if the data should be sent over in that particular field wherever it is indicated as C or not. Next we have B, which indicates backward compatibility, which means certain field has if it is indicated as B, it means that that field is suspended or some other field has been introduced or modified in order to use the data content that is being sent in this field, which is indicated as backward compatible, but this field is still present in the HL7 version to be used for communicating messages with the older versions of the HL7 message. Then we have W, which means withdrawn. Wherever we see W withdrawn, it means that that field is no longer being used and we cannot go ahead and use anything from that particular. We are not supposed to use that field. Next, we have repetition. Repetition sequence is nothing but the data within this particular field can repeat or not. If yes, then how many times it can repeat. That is represented here. So yesterday we did see an example about phone numbers, right? In PID 13, we do send the phone number, and while sending the phone number, we can determine if they have multiple phone numbers, we can have a repetition symbol, and we can send multiple phone numbers in the particular field. So that limitation is shown up here. You can go ahead and use the numbering system. You can go ahead and see represent this table and determine whether we can send repetitions or not. Next we have table. This table is nothing but this will redirect us back to HL7 standardized tables for each and every field. For example, we are talking about MSH3 here. MSH3 has a representation from table number 361, which means that table number 361 has been designed by HL7 organization, and they have told us that we have to use values or the structure of that table only in order to have data fields or data values that we are sending in MSH3 field. We'll understand more when we practically take a look at it down the line, when we really see some example about how the table data of HL7 defined tables can be used in the HL7 message. And finally, the final column indicates the field name. So here you will see what kind of data is being transmitted through that particular field. For instance, MSS3, we are going to sending application information, which means we are going to represent or add the application information that we are using in order to generate an HL7 message. Then we are seeing that there are few highlighted fields in green. So these are the fields that we usually need to memorize. From my experience, I have highlighted these fields So usually whenever you're working or running through an implementation, then you need to discuss with the other person on on what fields you are going to send information from, and also at times you might need to discuss few things like in which field you are sending the patient ID, whether it is 3, 4, or 2, and so on. So we need to keep few things in mind, or few memorize few fields which are very very important, which are frequently communicated in when we are talking about HL7 implementations. So I have highlighted those fields from my experience. So these are the talking points which we usually talk about during the real-time implementations, and you need to have this in mind whenever you are running. Not that you need to remember everything, because I know it is difficult, but at least knowing few of them is important. So I mean, it depends on how you want to memorize. You can memorize and keep in mind on what each field indicates for, because as I said, the other person when we are implementing, they'll just say, "Can you tell me what you're sending in the sending application field?" They will not tell you that it is a message 3. We need to have that in mind, that it is a message 3. So that is how you need to memorize all of these things. Whatever is highlighted in green, those are the important fields. You can go through them. So we'll quickly go through the MSH segment. So MSH1 represents field separator. So here we have a little exception. Usually, whenever we talk about any HL7 message, first field is this one, second field is this one, third is this one. Yesterday we talked about PID. So PID segment first field is set ID, second field is patient ID, third field is also patient ID, and so on. Only with MSH1 we have little exception that we need to keep in mind. The first, usually if we read as we read for PID segment, this becomes the first field, this becomes the second field, this becomes the third field, right? Because there are two pipes, one pipe here, one pipe here, and there are some characters here within this particular field. But that's not the case only with MSH segment. With MSH segment, the first pipe itself is represented as field number 1. Then from there on we have counting that starts from field number 2. Only with MSH, not with other segments. Only for MSH, the first pipe is called as field number 1. Then number 2 represents control characters. Number 3, number 4, 5, 6, and so on. Okay, that is a little exception that we need to keep in mind. So number 1 is field separator. Number 2 is represents encoding characters. So what are encoding characters? So these are the encoding characters, which are nothing but our message delimiters. Okay. Next we have MSH3, which is sending application, which means it will include what kind of from which application we are sending the message through. For example, if we are sending out a registration message, then the sending application would be PM system, and the receiving application would be EHR system. Sending application would be PM system, which is sent in MSH3. Receiving application would be MSH5. And then we have MSH4, which is sending facility, and MSH6, which is receiving facility. So in case if the PM system and EHR system are present in the same hospital, same location, not same hospital, then we have sending facility and receiving facility of the same location name. But in case if there is a scenario where we'll have PM system is centralized at one location and they have EHR systems all around the city. So at that point of time, sending application or the sending facility will be of one location, and receiving facility will be of another location. Okay. Next we have MSH7, which is to indicate date and time of the message. So it will specifically tell us when exactly the message got generated, along with the millisecond information of when or the point of generation of the message. Next, we have a message 9, which is message type. So message type, this is the actual name of the message. I would say that, for example, when we look at the textbook, we have the name of the textbook on the top of the title of the textbook, right? In the same way, a message 9 holds the title of the entire message. So how is that seen? Here, if you see ADT A04 is represented as the message type. So just by looking at HL7, we can understand what kind of message that we are dealing with. This represents that we are dealing with an ADT A04, which is a new patient registration message. So in case if this has ADT A08, then we understand that it is not just new patient, but it is an update of existing patient details and so on. So message 9 is very, very important and a required field, and that represents what is the message type that we are dealing with. Next, we have a message 10, which is message control ID. So each and every message that is being generated in the real-time world will have a unique ID, so that whenever there is any problem, if you want to narrow down to certain message that we have transacted, then a message 10 is the field which we'll be using in order to do so, which is nothing but the message control ID. So it needs to be as unique as possible. So usually what people do is whenever they are implementing an interface, they will use date and time along with seconds and milliseconds so that it can be unique. And few people will use date and time of generation concatenated with patient IDs to make it even more unique. So there are various ways how people can deal with it, but at the end of the day, it needs to be unique and should not be repeated for each and every message. Next, we have message 11, processing ID. So there are three fields, three processing IDs that are possible, which is D, T, and P. D indicates development, T indicates testing, P indicates production. So we are just indicating what kind of message that we are dealing with. During the process of testing, we will make sure that message 11 has the appropriate designated processing ID. If we are testing, we'll ensure that we have T. If it is a production message, we'll ensure that we have P in message 11. Next, 12 is version ID, which is simple. It will indicate what kind of HL7 version that we are dealing with, 2.3, 5, 7, 8, or what. That is sent in message 12. Next, we have message 16, 15 and 16. These are two acknowledgement types that are expected. message 15 is accept ACK, message 16 is application ACK. So we'll take a look at the difference about these two things tomorrow in detail, because they need little explanation of what is accept ACK and what is application ACK. These are two different level of acknowledgements. We'll be talking more about what exactly an acknowledgement is as well. Okay. Any questions, guys?
Is it case sensitive or in-case sensitive?
Which one?
The HL7 records, all the fields are.
It's not case sensitive. You can send whatever you want to send, whether you want to send caps or lower cases, that's fine. You can send it.
So I mean the messages that are optional, so I'm guessing, I mean, you still have to have the field separators, but it'll be just blank, or the requires will have to have some values in there. Is that basically it?
You're right. They should be blank. If there is no data in there, they should be left blank. We cannot have some other data. At the same time, we cannot just skip it. It has to be there and it should be blank.
And the MSH1 is the field separator. So if I were to change that from pipe to let's say a comma. So
Mm-hmm.
my entire message, all the fields would be separated by a comma then.
Uh, Honestly, we tried that. We had our own problems with it. If your question is whether I can change it or not, you can change it if you want to, but that's not considered as standard again. The standard is defined so that we have to use specifically pipe itself for separating the fields, and we are what do I say? We are forced to use that one only. But if you want to change and play with it to see if it works or not, yes, it will work. You can do that.
How to deal with enter symbol? Enter means segment separators are separated by enter key, right? And how do we separate by different operating system? Windows will accept two bytes, and Unix will accept only one character. So how do we deal with enter symbol?
Dilip, your voice is muffling and there is some echo. Can you come a little bit closer to the microphone and put
Is
up
it
the
okay now?
question? Yeah, it's better.
Yeah. So how do we deal with the enter symbol? I mean, it's a segment separator,
Uh-huh.
because Windows will accept two characters of enter symbol, two bytes of enter symbol, and Linux or Unix will accept only one byte of enter symbol, like /r/n will be 1 byte in Linux, but
Right.
Windows operating will take 2 bytes for one single enter symbol.
Okay.
So how do you overcome this? If I am sending from Windows to Linux or a Unix system,
Mm-hmm.
and that will not accept our enter key, right? So how do you
So,
overcome that?
so usually when we send, so I'll show that to you. Whenever we are sending from Windows, even if it is from Windows, we'll be sending CRLF at the end, which is nothing but the carriage return line feed. So it can have carriage return CRLF, or it might have just CR. So when Linux system receives it, it will automatically understand just by looking at these things that it is the end of the segment.
Okay.
So if you can install Notepad++ and see the message there, you can use this to show all the characters. It will show you.
Okay.
Any other questions, guys?
So just in the so for a receiving application, so especially with the optional ones, so
Hmm.
if a facility is like, okay, even though it's optional, we want it always to be required field.
Hmm.
So like so from the on the receiving end, like how do we can we account for that, like, and not make it optional?
On the receiving end, in the sense, are you talking about when you are receiving an HL7 message
Mhm.
uh, and you are interpreting that HL7 message and importing that into your system? Is that the scenario that you're talking about?
Right.
Okay, so at that point of time, you want uh, to, so in that particular instance, you want to make sure that the data is there, or data is, or you want to process even if the data is not there in a
Correct.
message
Yeah.
receive
To
application.
to process even if the message is not there, because it's a optional field.
Hmm.
But like, I mean, but it's something that is required for this, say, for this particular application. Say like a phone number or something, right?
Hmm.
Like, you
Hmm.
know, it may be optional, but we need it.
Right, right. So we'll be writing few filters and transformations in the Mirth Connect itself. Whenever we are receiving data, we will pass it through all those rules that we are going to build. So while building those rules, we can clearly tell if PID 13 is not present, even if it is optional. If PID 13 is not present, we want to error out that message with an error saying that PID 13 is missing. in the message. So that is how we usually go ahead and handle it. We'll write the rules, everything in the interface transformations and filters, so that these kind of things are accounted for.
Oh, okay. So you are able to throw a error message if it doesn't comply with the
Right.
Dixon, one more question from Dilip.
Yeah, Dilip.
Will I get acknowledgement once I transfer my Hl7 to lab, vice versa?
Yes, you will. Again, it depends on the message type that you're dealing with. I mean, the connectivity type that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with SFTP, then no, you will not get an acknowledgement. But if you're dealing with TCP/IP, where you'll be sending out the message through VPN, then yes, you will get an acknowledgement back.
Is the acknowledgement also in Hl7 format or a different?
Yes. Yes, they are also in Hl7 format.
Okay.
All right, guys. So I'm not hearing more questions, so we'll conclude our today's session here. Tomorrow we'll continue from where we have stopped today. We'll be taking a look at the acknowledgement types of message segment, and then we'll continue up from there with the other segments flowing through for ADT message. Thank you so much, guys. You all have a blessed day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.